I am Marlon Marrache, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Epictetus and says, "Make it your business to draw out the best in others by being the example yourself." Marlon Marrache is a distinguished law enforcement professional with 25 years in the Los Angeles Police Department. Holding a Juris Doctorate and regarded as a leading authority in discipline and misconduct, particularly in use of force investigations and officer-involved shootings, Marlon spent over 13 years with Internal Affairs. He is an expert witness for high-profile cases, a consultant to law enforcement departments, and keynote speaker on all police-related matters. In 2023, Marlon launched Internal Affairs, a police podcast to give people a behind-the-scenes look into what really happened in some of the most well-known law enforcement cases. With recent calls to defund the police, crime skyrocketing in many communities around the world, and a bigger spotlight than ever on law enforcement, Marlon is here to help. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to perform in a high-stress career, how leading by example inspires those around you, why we need to protect the ones who are protecting us, and how to create positive pathways for the people who need it most. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life, so there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Marlon Marrache. Marlon, great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Big game, James. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to even be here. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're doing some incredible work. So first of all, I want to acknowledge you for all the amazing things you're doing. I also want to give a big shout out to our mutual friend, Andrew Sullivan, who came on the show in episode 154 and connected us. Sully's an amazing guy. So shout out, Sully. To kick things off, what side of the law were you on growing up?
Well, when I came here from Peru, I was always told, police is just like, oh my God, don't do anything bad because something bad's going to, like if you do something bad's going to happen to you. So we had this, I suppose, this hierarchy, type of feeling where, hey man, don't get in trouble because, you're probably going to, they're probably going to give it to you.
Chris Rock always said when the LAPD comes to get you, they're bringing an ass whooping with them.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to get a beat down is what we used to call it, right? And so, that, I suppose that image, that fear, kind of sense for me, to, hey, don't do anything bad. But I'm a sports guy. I'm a soccer American, but I'm a football passionate guy. I coach it. I play to this very day. Me and my old 50 and 60 old heads every Sunday just get together for an hour and just go at it. So sports has always been my thing. It's kind of been my scapegoat, if you will. So I never really, dabbled with trouble, if you will.
For sure. We were actually talking to someone in a previous episode about how just sports, it's a great thing for young people to be involved in because it keeps you focused on health and nutrition, and particularly how doing the reps can also give you a great result. You get the teamwork and the bonding and so many other just amazing benefits of doing sports at a young age.
Absolutely 100% factual in terms of structure, right? Organization, being part of something. When you have that as a young age, by all means. And I suppose the good thing being here in the United States is that you got the main three, right? I mean, you can do the football, American, you can do baseball, and you can also do basketball. And of course now with the MLS and soccer is just becoming more prominent, right? More popular. You and I both know that soccer is the most popular sport in the world. Sorry, but that is a true factual statement. And you have that in your life, I think you're going to be okay.
Yes, for
as
sure.
you grow up.
Yes, I agree. In your law enforcement career, you were known for leading by example. Was that something that you developed through perhaps a particular mentor, or was that an attitude that you had from day one in the force?
A combination of both. Look, I really had some really good field training officers. So when you do the academy for 6 months, they teach you basic concepts. They cram in criminal law, like in 2 months for something you're supposed to know. I mean, I went to law school and criminal law is a whole year, and it's still not enough because there's just so many laws. And so that environment, even though it was sterile and you're in training and they're teaching you stuff, once you get out in the streets is when you really, really says it all about, what kind of person, or I should say, what type of police officer you're really going to be. When I say what type, meaning, Are you really in this to make a difference, right? To protect and to serve. That's what you're here for. So essentially, the job is not really about you. It's more about helping others. So that's very, very important. So that kind of grows and stays with you as you move on in your career and you learn. And to be out in the streets and learn patrol functions, how to become a good police officer or an effective police officer, you just got to get repetitions in. And because you just don't know, one day you're going to be at a domestic violence radio call. Next day, you're going to be investigating a child abuse or maybe a rape. I mean, it's just what we always say is just the worst that God has to offer. And so with that comes the mental component, which 25 years ago, it wasn't even talked about, which I am so happy today. Mental wellness is so huge and, it's out on the forefront. So in terms of leadership, I suppose when I became a sergeant, right, when I got promoted to sergeant in 2007, that's when you really have that leadership role where now you're responsible, right? You're managing your subordinates, officers in these critical incidents. And it's the best job, not just in the LAPD, probably in any law enforcement agency, because you're like the middleman, right? You got the bosses telling you, hey, these are the task operations. You need to do A, B, and C. And then you're the one saying, Roger that, I got that. And then you're influencing, your inferiors so that they can also grow and become sergeants.
Yeah, I love it. Well, how different is law enforcement today? I mean, mobile phones, that's one thing. Obviously, things like Ring cameras and Nest cameras. It's like every home seems to have about 5 cameras, and every single person has at least one camera on them at all times.
And to your camera point, body-worn video. The birth of it was in 2015. I believe it was Rialto PD who did the test run, if you will, that agency. And in 2016, the Los Angeles Police Department pretty much came up with their policy as to how it's going to be deployed, operated, do's and don'ts, best practices, and all other agencies kind of grandfathered into our policy. So now we're 2015, we're almost 10 years into body-worn video. That completely changes police work in a sense that there's more transparency, which is what we need, which is what we preach. And I'm all for that. And yeah, no, it's changed a lot, not just with body-worn video, because, I'm sure, some of your audience is going to be like, well, what do you mean by that, Marlon? Is it because before body-worn video used to cut corners or do bad stuff? Yeah, of course, there is corruption. Corruption is not something that, shouldn't be talked about. It's not something that we should hide. It's something that we shall always be out in the forefront. But guess what? Corruption's been around since like the 1940s, especially in LAPD.
For sure. And one thing you talk about a lot is this idea of if you've actually done something wrong, you should be held accountable for that. Like, of course, let's look after the police, let's do the best job. But if you've done something and we have very clear consequences of that, and you are aware of that if you do A, then B is going to happen, then you have to live with the consequences.
Absolutely. Self-accountability is huge. And oftentimes, which is one of several reasons why I started this police podcast called Internal Affairs, is because it just so happens that in our culture, it's a bit taboo to be talking about getting in trouble, right? Meaning getting in trouble, there's allegations being made against you for something that you did while you were providing these police functions or these services. And so what happens oftentimes is that you always do, or you think you're doing the right thing, especially with the use of force, right? You apply all these tactics, which you're thinking to yourself, well, this is what I was taught. This is what I was, this is what I learned. And it just so happens that at times it just doesn't go the way it's supposed to. I mean, you and I can agree that any use of force it's ugly. It's not textbook. It's not what they taught you in the academy. It's just, you got to take these real life variables, right? And you have these basic concepts that you learned, and there's a strong possibility that you're going to deviate, and when I say deviate, sometimes it's substantially and it doesn't look good, and emotional intelligence, that's huge. We don't teach EI in the academy to this very day, which is surprising. So, tempers are flying, things are going off and things happen. And sometimes you need to be held accountable for some wrongdoing, and unfortunately, it doesn't happen quite often.
For sure. You mentioned body cams before. What are the rules on that? Are they on just all the time, or is there like an on and off switch that the officer controls? And same with the cameras on the car as well?
Correct. So you have digital in-car video system cameras that have been around, oh gosh, I want to say 10 plus years. So that one automatically goes on if you you responded to a critical incident. As far as body worn video cameras, each individual agency sets its policies, but essentially, you turn it on when there is any type of police services being rendered, for the most part, right? You and I can be at the train station right now, and someone flags us down to say, hey, you know what, that person over there took my purse, robbed me, or whatever. You got to turn it on. And so what happens is when you turn it on, it used to have a 30-minute buffer. So it records, 30 seconds, but we increased it to 2 minutes. So for all you law enforcement officers listening out there, you just better make sure that what you're doing the 2 minutes prior to turning it on is, legitimate, professional, and respectful.
Yeah, because it could save your life and your career, right? Like if you forget to turn that on and people accuse you of something with a camera filmed from a bit of an awkward angle, selectively edited.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and very, very good point you bring about body-worn videos, because that's not the tell-all story. There is so many experts, there's even science, right? Data out there that even by the speed of of which it's being recorded, if you were to slow it down, the actual pixels or the actual view of the camera doesn't really depict everything that you're actually doing, especially when it comes to a critical incident and applying force. If that kind of makes sense.
For sure.
So, yes, it's always good to gather as much evidence, which is part of being an internal affairs investigator. When you're accused of wrongdoing, your job as an IO, an investigator officer, is to go out there and just gather as much evidence as possible. My mantra when I teach at Savage Training Group, I'm a law enforcement instructor for a private company. Like I mentioned, Savage Training Group, my mantra has always been no stone goes unturned. And that shouldn't just apply only to police. I mean, look, if you're doing your job and part of your duties is to investigate, you should be turning every single stone, not because you want to prove to the adjudicator, hey, they did something wrong, or you know what? Yeah, here's all the evidence. You need to adjudicate this, but I took every single lead and I turned every single stone.
And what does a police officer carry these days, and how do they know what's an appropriate use of force? Because something for someone who's 6'8" and exceptionally well trained would be different than, perhaps a woman officer who might be 5'4" and not physically as strong as the other person.
Yeah, you know what? Good question. I would say, the good old, saying that I learned in law school, it depends, right? It depends on the circumstances. Certain circumstances that you feel are going to escalate to either affect an arrest, if someone's going to prevent an escape, or you're going to overcome some resistance, you're going to apply force. So that decision really lies on you as an individual. Now, of course, I just kind of gave you a Reader's Digest version of 835 APC, which is the Criminal Penal Code of the use of force policy, which is long. You really have to pull the curtains back, peel every single layer to really know exactly what the law is, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the Bible for all police officers. So effecting an arrest, preventing an escape, and overcoming resistance is when you really have to think to yourself, okay, I think it's time for me to apply force.
So if you're a police officer and you do things by the book, even if later it turns out that perhaps that wasn't the best decision to make in there, then at least the officer is okay to continue their career. Like, how well do you trust that the sort of handbook that police are trained with is updated enough to factor in different situations that can occur?
Great loaded question, because what we don't know is, when were you last trained? So take me, for example. I retired close to 2 years in July, right? July of this year will be 2 years. The last time I got training of use of force, an updated training course, must have been 10 years ago. So, I shouldn't be used as an example because I kind of teach this stuff. So I have an idea what to do when I apply force. So let's just take someone who's a 15-year veteran, whose last time they actually had any use of force policy update training was maybe 5 years ago. So that person's going to make that decision on what they know, right? And then we talked about earlier about deviating. There is deviation, no matter what, when you apply force. But the question is it substantial? One, which it is in the department, and I can speak for LAPD, is the department is saying that's fine. You can substantially deviate from whatever it is that you learn, but can you justify it? And if you can't justify your actions, then we're looking at discipline. And that probably applies. And again, I can't speak for all other departments, not even just in the state of California, but I would say it's probably like a universal blanket type of mindset you should have when you're out there doing police work.
And is the taser, has that done a good enough job at reducing fatalities? And
very, very good question.
Yeah.
The taser is one of your non-lethal weapons. You know what? I'm sure you watched plenty of YouTube videos.
Plenty. Movies, everything.
Movies, the whole nine. And, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't. My understanding is there's supposed to be this new taser that's got it sounds like a shotgun. So it's going to so one of your policy is you got to tell them, look, I'm going to tase you and I'm warning you, right? And you're telling everybody else, look, this is about to go down, right? Of course, the suspect's going to be like, yeah, whatever, And next thing you know, it actually sounds like a pop. And my understanding is that the actual darts, when they are in you, it controls the central nervous system. So if you're laying on the ground and trying to get up, it'll sense which muscle twitch, and it would provide more voltage to that particular movement so that you remain,
immobile,
immobile until we effect an arrest and handcuff them and they're in custody. So, it's state of the art. It's barely coming out now, I want to say. I think they're done with testing. I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I think my LAPD, my wonderful alum, which I'm very grateful of, they actually have it deployed. But but just know that it doesn't always work. So here you are, you're going, imagine someone being on PCP or just a complete, drugs or just, they're high as a kite.
Meth and superhuman strength, you hear about it?
Yeah, absolutely. PCP, meth, you're talking about those type of drugs are just, you're numb to any type of pain.
Yeah.
And the biggest challenge is, what do you do? What do you do after? Right? So you better have a plan.
And that's where upgrading to a more lethal option, if you feel like your life is on the line or someone else is considered.
Absolutely. Now we start talking about your use of deadly force. That's a host of factors that you have to take into consideration. But you know what? The way I see it is, try to do everything before you actually pull the trigger. And you know what? The state of California has done well. It goes to your original question about how police work has changed. AB 392 in January of 2020 is when this 835 APC, the use of force policy, completely has changed. It was revamped for you to make really, really hard decisions before pulling the trigger. Make sure that you're communicating, make sure that you're exhausting all these de-escalation tactics, non-lethal weapons, everything before you actually pull the trigger. And that's a good thing. Was police work 25 years ago completely different? Absolutely. I remember in the academy, just to give you an example, when I was taught tactics, they told you the acronym ATD. Some will refer to as ATM. And what that means is, you know what? I'll ask you, hey, James, put your hands behind your head. You're going to jail. And you're like, F you, right? Okay, I'm telling you to put your hands behind your head because you're going to jail. F you. Well, then the D is you do it, right? Or the M is you make it. You make it happen. So that mentality is completely different than what it is to a young officer right now working the streets. Because there's de-escalation tactics. There's, non-lethals like the taser or the OC spray, the pepper spray, and just a variety of things, which is a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. Because I got to tell you, James, for you to take someone's life, which it never happened in my career, I don't know how you can live knowing that for the rest of your life, you have to live with the fact that you pulled the trigger and you took someone's life. And you and I both know nobody wins.
For sure.
And there's no winning in that.
And that de-escalation, you see people who are getting pulled over and they're just so aggressive. And if you get an officer who, perhaps having some marital challenges or some personal stuff, working overtime, that split-second decision, all that stuff can get pear-shaped very quickly.
Absolutely. And I'm just so glad that, part of my mission and my promise that I made when I retired was to give to the next generation and to educate, as much as we can. And one of those was a platform of doing a podcast where hopefully someone who's young on the job or who's trying to come on to be a police officer is listening to these stories to better themselves, to know that, hey, don't be like Marlon, who worked 20 years of just 6-7 days a week, just massive amount of overtime to live a certain lifestyle, only to get you a divorce and time away from your family, from my daughter in this case. So I reflect back on the times when I worked the streets and I came home and I'm just like, I had to take a second to, calm down and take a deep breath and just, register what just happened, and then go do it all over again the next day. So that takes a toll, and there's more awareness now. And then you got to ask yourself, is this something really that you want to do,
For sure. What's the toughest or most confronting day you had on when you were patrolling the streets?
There's some that stick out the most. I want to say the one that I can't stop thinking about is when I had not me, it was my partner and I, it was in West LA. She was a 19-year-old UCLA student who had a knife stuck in her stomach and she was going to kill herself. So the call came out as a suicide in progress. And mind you, I was just a young cop. I did my 1-year probation. I only had 1 year under my belt under training officers who were teaching me to be a cop. And here I am. I transferred over to West LA. I'm with my partner and we roll. And, it's one thing. And I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine where, in this type of profession, when there's a problem and the shit's going down, we go to the problem. And some people, they don't even choose to do that. So it takes a special type of person, by impulse to go. It's kind of like if you and I were right now, we're eating in a restaurant and some active shooter comes in. I would hope you're not just going to run and take off from me, but my point is that half of those people take off while I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to eliminate this threat? Does that kind of make sense?
For sure.
And so going back to this incident, she had I tend to use humor because humor is like one of the best remedies to cope with such a high stress situation. She had her knife in her stomach, and what I remember was we get there, her mom, at the time, I want to say she was working on the she was one of the attorneys for the O.J. Simpson trial. I'm taking you back to 1999. And I'm sorry, 1999, somewhere around there. And she's just freaking out. And so what I come to find out in getting information is that she was molested when she was very young. She lost her father, but she was a UCLA student, and she confided in her mom's last boyfriend. The mom had a couple of boyfriends, but this particular boyfriend was like a father figure to her. She had a close bonding relationship with him, and they broke up. And so I suppose the boyfriend was telling her, hey, your mom and I are not going to be together anymore. And she swallowed a whole bunch of pills and she just wanted to take her life, considering she experienced rape when she was young, had an absent father, just a host of issues. And so here she is in the bathroom and, I knocked and she's like, who are you? And I said, my name is Officer Marrache, LAPD. She goes, are you the police? I go, yeah, I'm LAPD, I'm police officer. I go, can you please just open the door? We want to talk to you. She goes, no, I'm not going to open the door. Meanwhile, as I'm talking to her, my partner is around the corner and he can see from the side window and he's talking to me. He's going, keep talking to her. She's, build that rapport. She's listening to you. And she says, I don't want to open up the door. And I'm all, why not? She goes, because I watch TV. You cops lie all the time. She goes, you guys are liars. And then for a quick second, I look over at my partner. I'm like, hey, she's got a point. And so I go back and I say, hey, listen, I think her name was Sarah, or I don't remember. This has been a long time ago. And she says, I said, Sarah, listen, I have this dilemma. She said, well, what dilemma do you have? I said, I'm losing my hair, and it's a really big thing for men, and I'm thinning so bad on top to the point where I'm going to have to go to like a 0-1. She goes, what do you mean? Do you want to just like shave your head? I'm like, I don't know. It's just so depressing. I want to cry over it because I don't want to lose my hair. I used to have so much hair, and my partner's telling me, keep talking to her. I go, look, can I just please get your opinion? That's all I want. Just drop the knife, open up the door, and let's have this conversation. She goes, are you sure you're not going to arrest me? I go, I promise you I won't arrest you. And so next thing you know, she drops the knife, she opens up the door, and she gives me this huge hug, very emotional. And we sit in the couch for 2 hours, and that's how I got to know the story about, her childhood and everything. So, those type of stories is what we should be showcasing. It's what we should be sensationalizing, but unfortunately, media, and we don't, which I suppose it's one of the reasons why I'm here. And that's why we're having all these podcasts, because I really feel that, these type of life-saving events that happen, they're just not talked about enough.
For sure. There's a video I saw on TikTok. It's probably going to make me cry, actually, thinking about it. So I'll have to laugh so I don't cry. It was a video of a veteran who had pulled over on the side of the road to take his own life, and a police officer turned up, and this guy was hysterical. And he gave this guy, the police officer's like, looking for any way to be able to help him. And he gave the guy a hug. And that was it. The way that this guy, the veteran, embraced the hug, it is an incredible video. It just brings me to tears every time I think about it.
The power of listening, the power of, empathy is just, it's unmeasurable. We can both agree to that.
It really is.
And in this type of job, in this profession, that's what you're signing up for. So, make sure that you, and it's taught me a lot, James. It's taught me, as a man in general, we tend to be very selfish. We tend to think about ourselves too much. We're quick to pull the trigger and talk, and the wife is just sitting there going, okay, can I kind of tell you about my day? Yeah. You're like, no, I'm not done with my day yet. Right. And so what happens is that, it teaches you how to be unselfish.
Yeah.
So,
and I think there needs to be more of a spotlight on what law enforcement has done, and obviously first responders more broadly have done, rather than, the other things that just make all the headlines. It's really important to look out for the people who are looking out for us.
No, absolutely. I worked media relations for a short time. I was what they call the PIO, a public information officer. And that's exactly the philosophy that I wanted to bring in is, for every critical incident that we have and we sensationalize and that we do sound bites, we should be having 2 or 3 life-saving stories, or a good story about how the police saved somebody. Or, let me tell you about this caper where, we got into this crazy pursuit. This person just got done killing 2 people, and, we chased him down, and now he's in custody and he's going through the criminal proceedings. Those are the kind of things that we should, but hopefully we'll get there. Well, these podcasts should help.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show.
How accurate are some of the gang violence and gang areas that you see in some of the movies, particularly in Los Angeles? Are they sort of accurate?
Yes. Well, movie type, no, but yes, of course. Gang activity and gang on gang crime, for example, is alive and well, without a doubt. That's a subculture that I would tend to think that, we will try to reduce as decades go by, and hopefully the next generation, by the time we're gone, maybe there is some reduction. But the main challenges about gang crime in it itself is not just so much the, a rival gang member gets involved into a shooting with, another gangster, and now you're waiting for that retaliatory gang shooting. It's just the fact that, and I don't mean to sound way too political, but, reform is a huge component. The fact that some people don't want to come forward to witness what they just saw because maybe they just don't believe in the system, the criminal justice system. You're not going to get prosecuted. They're not going to help us. And if I stick my neck out there and give you the information, what's that to say? How are you going to protect me? So there's all these variables that you got to take in consideration. But it is pretty true and accurate as it relates to, yes, there is gang crime for sure.
And how do the gangs get young people in their area? How do they recruit them so effectively?
Very, very good questions from my times working back in the early 2000s. I suppose it's a little different now. Maybe that's not really my area of expertise, but what I can tell you that there's a subculture that's embedded within certain communities, especially in South LA, where I suppose a lot of young men, they don't have many opportunities, minorities for that matter. The fact that they have an absent father, that's huge. The incarceration rate is through the roof. And once, that generation of, I should say the prior generation is not around, how can you teach your kid, right from wrong? You're not even there. And then the mom is, doing what she has to do just to live and make, ends meet. So there's just all these social components that come with the recruitment or why young kids get involved in gang activity, and I should say criminal activity for that matter. I suppose it's just survival for them because they just don't know anymore. I mean, what do they know? They don't know. I mean, you can't be going to Disneyland, paying $130 just to get in and take your family. So as an example, or, it's pretty expensive to live here in the state of California just to hang out and, even go to, I don't know, the Santa Monica Pier on a regular day. My thinking is these young kids, they're just really fixated in this subculture where this is all I know. This is my image. This is what I'm supposed to do. About my only way out is to play sports would be one component. But, maybe there is no hope. And that's everybody's fault. We should all be contributing to that. But that's what I kind of sense why it's still, a recruitment, if you will, of young kids. I just feel like they'd probably, with not having a father and around and not having many opportunities, kind of takes a toll on you.
Lack of positive role models, as well as infrastructure to be able to develop who you are, start to develop some talents and some skills to enable you to sort of make some money and add value to other people.
Oh, absolutely. And by all means, I haven't been around, any communities. And I point out South LA because at one point, South LA was the most violent, and it probably still is. Don't quote me on that, but I'm sure it is. But my thinking is that there is probably more activities and there's probably more positivity than there was, over 20 years ago. So I know that we're heading in the right direction, but you know what? We can't stop. And I just feel like we can do more.
How can a police officer try and enact change in a community that's, a very challenging community, perhaps riddled with violent crime, a lack of positive role models? Police may be perceived as the enemy. How can you go in there and stay positive and optimistic about the future of that community when perhaps you have even come from that community and you're so fully aware of just the challenges that they face, especially when you hear so many stories of there are some cases where people pretend to almost befriend the police and it ends up being an ambush and bad things happen as well. Like the police, you have to always be on your guard, right? For that 1 in a million or 1 in 100 chance of something really bad happening.
Oh, no, absolutely. I always say you got to call 911. There's a saying, today's victim is tomorrow's suspect, right? You can be helping the victim out and next thing you know, they're a suspect tomorrow. And guess what? They got shot down. They're the suspect. And now you got to help them out as well. I suppose, one handshake at a time. Just be out there, be very, very involved with community. My LAPD does a great job, and so do many, many agencies to do a lot of community related type of work. I mean, we have senior lead officers where their sole job is to focus on quality of life issues as it relates to that particular community, that area. And your phone needs to be on at all times. And if a neighbor's complaining about, hey, I have a whole bunch of encampments and, I got all this trash right here in the alley next to my backyard, your job is to figure out a way how to improve that quality of life for that particular resident, because that's your area. You're responsible for that. So we've been doing that for decades. We get better at it each and every single day, but the general way about going to foster these relationships with the community is just be out there as much as possible. But you're right. You can be befriended, and that's the risk you take, right?
Mm-hmm. Do they train things like not wearing your wedding ring when you're out in the streets? Is that right?
You know what? The light bulb hit. That's a really good one there, James. There is officers who won't, because you shouldn't. That's one of several. I think another is tactically. You know what? Don't take the same route home every single day.
Really?
Don't do that. And in the academy, if you're making a right, left, and right to go home, maybe the next day you might want to go all the way around. When you get out early in the morning to go to work, 4 or 5 in the morning, instead of getting in the car, just kind of scan the area to see if these are all the vehicles that actually belong in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of cops live a decent lifestyle. So, a lot of them have been out in Chino, live in good areas. But if you happen to live in Los Angeles, that's something that you do. All sorts of things, because you're absolutely right. I mean, look, when you're out of the academy, I can tell you maybe a lot of my colleagues, not all, but share the same sentiment that you're in a state of paranoia. You're carrying a gun now, and you know that your life can be taken in a split second. So I remember days where I slept with my gun next to me in my bed, or I would drive with my gun underneath me, my leg, knowing that wherever I go, I'm ready and quick and ready to, to protect myself. But, habits go, you get complacent with, but the way the state of affairs are now, maybe I should be.
Yeah, for sure. How are you such a positive guy, knowing that you've seen the worst of what humanity has to offer for so many years?
You know what? I've always been that way. That is, man, it's humor. You got to have it. You see the worst that God has to offer. I mean, I've seen dead body. You can't even imagine the things that a police officer see. How do you maintain it? I don't know. It's for some people, it's tough. I would say that for some officers, it's challenging. I think for me, it wasn't really that difficult to face these, violent type of situations, because in my past, with my father and my mom, they were divorced when they were young, but I've gone through some trauma. I've dealt with some controversy and, some adversity, and it's made me who I am today. But then again, I was in the academy at 29 years old, and I graduated when I was 30. So I had a little bit of life experience. So when I do show up to a domestic violence radio call, I was able to be cool, calm, and collective, and, and try to come with a solution. Or if someone's going to jail, try very, very hard not to use force, right? But for some, it's really difficult. And again, I'm taking you back 25 years ago, where I suppose a candidate was like me, just excited, like, wow, I want to be doing police work, right? And it's a nervous wreck. As opposed to today's candidate, maybe you're not thinking the way I used to think. With social media, you got kids that are gamers. Some kids are more into, I suppose they're more, have more awareness because of social media. They see all these officer-involved shootings and just all this violence in the masses. They're probably thinking to themselves, I don't want to do this for 70, 80 grand. That's just, I don't want to put my life on the line like that. And so for me, it was just, my best friend influenced me to come on the job. He had 2 years already. So that was a big decision-making on my part. But I never had problems where I suppose someone who's younger, right, 21, 22, maybe just trying to finish college, and you've had a really positive, lifestyle or with mom and dad, and you never faced any adversity, any trauma, any neglect, abandonment, et cetera, chances are it's gonna take a toll on you.
That life experience you mentioned is huge. You can see that in terms of resilience for anything. And you mentioned there, like, who would want to be a cop these days, which I totally get. How do you feel about police departments around the world lowering standards to get people in? There's the quote, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. So they need to increase the incentive by saying, hey, it's not as hard as you might think, or is it not as hard as it used to be to get people in? So how do you feel about that?
Oh, well, me personally, I'm not a big proponent of lowering standards. When someone asks me this question about hiring, right, getting people to do this profession, I always think about what I went through, right? So just to kind of lay a foundation for you. So back in the mid-90s in 1998, when I was appointed to the academy, there used to be 1,000 applicants a month in the city of Los Angeles. And out of that 1,000, they only took the best 5%. Out of the best 5%, they took 50%. And out of that 50%, they took the best 50% that actually got a letter. Back then, it was letters. I'm sure now you get an email or something that you have been appointed to the police academy, which means that you have gone through a very, very extensive background process. You're the cream of the crop. It's not like I know there was a news article not too long ago where the LAPD had its highest recruitment in 1 month was 1,000. You know what? I don't know. I would tend to think that's probably not that accurate. But man, to lower that is it's kind of like saying, you know what? You're smart, but I have doubts that you might get to the academy. So the way I see the academy, and we're talking about academy life, is you have kind of like 4 components that you definitely want to have to be hired. You're going to be challenged mentally. You're going to be challenged physically. You're going to be challenged academically, right? And certainly psychologically. So when you start talking about candidates, okay, you're probably got a 4-point GPA. Got it. You went to an Ivy League school. But can you handle the physicality, right? Calisthenics, running, it's important. You're a police officer. You're going to chase someone. That's just part of the job, right? Or you might get someone who's an MMA fighter. He's going to say, God, push some sit-ups and pull-ups? Not a problem. Run 3-4 miles a day? Granted. But what was the last time you actually hit the books and really study? Because we're testing you 2-3 exams a week. And guess what? If you fail once, we'll give you only one crack at it again. And if you fail a second time, you're out. And so that's the way I see it. So if we're going to lower the standards, which chances are, I know that it's out in front now. For all we know, they probably have been lowering the standards for, I don't know, decades, I suppose. I mean, I came on 20-something years ago. But, how do you measure, or how can you look at someone and say, I think that you're actually going to be a really good candidate? Because the academy life is just, you're talking about 4 o'clock in the morning. You have, what if you're married and have, a family? You got to be hopefully in bed by 8, 9 to wake up again at 3 or 4 in the morning to go to the academy. Every single day you have to study, and it's rigorous and it's demanding. You have Saturday and Sunday off, and then, you got to balance be with your family, but then you got to study and get ready for Monday to wake up again at 3 or 4 in the morning. So, that repetition, which is one of the reasons why military personnel always succeeds for the most part. But now we have this PTSD issue to deal with, So it's a loaded question as to why would you want to lower the standards? Me personally, I'm not a big proponent of that.
And you did a lot of work with internal affairs. So if you watch the movies, internal affairs strikes terror into the hearts of the regular police officers. Can you give us a bit of an overview of what the relationship is like in real life and what your role with internal affairs was?
Oh, gosh. We're the dark side. We're the rat squad. Some are reminding me, you remember the show Dragnet?
No.
There's a show back in the 40s, Dragnet. Just the facts, ma'am. I forgot his name is Joe something. Anyways, it was an LAPD show. And this is in the 1940s, and they actually had an episode about internal affairs. They're just about, they're out here to get you, And so you and I both know in the 60s, LA Confidential, right, the movie, that's pretty true and accurate. In terms of movies, that's kind of like what went down here in the state of Los Angeles, and it was super corrupt. And so in the 60s, there was a chief who was in the Navy who adopted this board of inquiry, this process. It used to be called, it's still called the board of inquiry process in the United States Navy, right? Their disciplinary process, and he brought it to the LAPD. And what his philosophy was, you know what? You're going to be judged by your own peers. You're going to have a defense. You're going to have a prosecution. Prosecution is going to be internal affairs. You're going to be officer representation. And you know what? Present your case, no any different than a trial. And if you're found guilty and there's serious allegations of misconduct, this panel, 3-panel member, 2 command staff officers and 1 civilian, they're going to determine whether or not you're going to be fired. So that's in the 60s. So now we're 60 years in, and yeah, it's bad. So I'm an IA alumni. I worked that process that I just explained to you. I was in the prosecution. I remember a lieutenant saying, "Hey, Marlon, you're an advocate. You're in internal affairs. Don't think of this as a prosecutorial role." I call BS. It is. These officers are facing serious allegations. The biggest challenge, James, is that the quality of the investigation and behind the scenes. It's what they call influence peddling. I learned that, from watching a lot of politics. Everybody has, not everybody, but certain people, as the levels review, from the beginning of the captain at that division all the way to the chief of police, all these levels of review, sometimes it's self-serving, sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's just, you know what, I don't like James. Oh, he's just an Australian guy. I didn't ever like him in the first place, so let's just give him 5 days. So it doesn't become about the process. It becomes about, I just don't like James. And yeah, maybe it's not sustained. Sustained, when you classify a complaint investigation of allegations of misconduct, for the most part, it's either sustained, which means that it actually occurred, or unfounded, which means that it just didn't occur. So sustained means it happened. So that's what the department's saying, that, you know what, James, when you went out to that radio call, or you responded, or at that traffic stop, you did these allegations, I'm sustaining, which means it occurred. Well, more often than not all the time, as an officer, you're like, that's not what happened. That's not the way it went down. And that's the reason why internal affairs get such a bad reputation, And so I made a promise. It's not just a promise. I just self-reflected and thought to myself, look, we have this huge disciplinary machine. It's not well oiled, and the assembly line changes all the time. And so what can I do in this podcast to bring awareness, not just to other police officers, but to even a person who's not even a police officer? Because what do? We preach transparency. We preach public trust. And this is a good way of doing it when you have someone coming in saying, hey, you know what? Let me hold myself accountable for what I did at the traffic stop. And you know what? Whoever's listening out there, don't do what I did. Or I get an investigator who worked internal affairs and says, look, I investigated this case. And I got to tell you, you know what? I honestly felt that whatever the department was alleging against this accused officer, it didn't happen. But when I turned it in, the powers to be decided to change their mind, or maybe had a personal vendetta against that officer. And next thing you know, he's facing discipline and suspension days. So that's accountability, both ways. And it's important. It's important because I do want to change the stigma, from being the rat squad or the dark side, if that kind of makes sense.
For sure. They talk about discrepancies in eyewitness reports. Does that happen for police officers as well, that what you believe happened ends up being quite different?
Yes. Very, very good question. So you can quote me on these numbers. So when I was in internal affairs from 2011 to 2015, there's over 3,000, think about that, 3,000 public complaints, which means that a lot of people felt like 3,000, that's a lot. 96.4% of those complaints came back unfounded. It didn't happen. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we have a 4% that's, yeah, it happened and maybe they're rogue. Maybe they're cutting corners. Maybe they shouldn't be police officers. It's kind of serious. We don't know that. But then again, what are we talking about? We're talking about, during that time, you're talking 10,000 officers. So think about that. If you're talking 3,000, that's a very, very small percentage.
Yeah, big numbers in any organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it's big because we are LAPD, but if you start talking about small agencies, they're probably even getting maybe 2 or 3. Santa Monica's, as an example, is a force of, I think sworn is like 200, just north of 200 sworn police officers. They're probably getting maybe, 10. I'm just throwing a number out there, but it's not many. And out of those 10, chances are they're not all sustained. And so I bring that up to say that what you believe, especially a third party, I saw those officers, over there throw some up against the wall. Now that we have body-worn video, it can be what we call it demonstrably false. That's one adjudication where, and here's the kicker, is that, you want to talk about transparency. A lot of these complainants, they don't care, because here's the deal. You send them a letter saying, look, we fully investigated this and it came back unfounded. If you have any questions, please give us a call. Guess how many calls I've got in my career doing this for over 12 years?
How many?
One. Where he actually got the letter and he was kind of like upset, like, what happened? We sat down and broke bread and we talked about it. Okay, I understand. And so what does that tell me? It tells me that, I don't know, I think when you're pissed off and you are mad at the police at a traffic stop or when you're dealing with them, by the time you get home, I suppose your anger, within 72 hours, it just kind of goes down and you're just like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. And then we preach zero tolerance. We want to hear from you. We don't want you to think or to have this perception that police officers are out there, using profanity or throwing up people against the wall, or all these things that you're alleging. We care about that, and so participate, cooperate. And a lot of times they don't, and that can be anywhere from someone who's homeless that's making a complaint to someone who is suffering from mental illness to a businessman, a very, entrepreneur type of that says, this is what the police did. It just varies what the complainant is, but I just feel like, we're halfway there to let you know that, hey, we investigated. This is not the way it went down. Let's have a talk about it. But we don't, know.
As a police officer, were you more worried about an encounter with a potential criminal that you might have seen before, or when you moved to internal affairs? If there was someone out to get you, I imagine you wouldn't want a police officer, if there was someone, even a 1 in a million shot who was a really bad person out to get you in internal affairs. Would you be more worried about the criminal or the bad cop?
Oh,
or is that just such a movie type scenario?
Very movie.
Yeah.
Very movie. Culture will dictate, because culture is what we are. I mean, I'm a true believer that, cop culture will dictate what you do and what you don't do. And the culture is that we're just bad people. You'll get an email saying, we want to schedule an interview, because of these allegations that happened on March 2nd when you did this traffic stop. Half of them be like, I don't even want to talk to you guys. That's just the mentality, because they feel like they're out to get you.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think that. No, that's very, very movie type. But what I can tell you is, lately, it's been brought out in the forefront, but it has been in existence, is that police officers use internal affairs as a weapon, to weaponize to get you, in trouble, or to let them know that, hey, he did something wrong, when in reality, that's not really misconduct, but it's a tool, it's a weaponization, and it's just very, very unfortunate because it really, really affects, the camaraderie amongst officers. And maybe one day it does get into it. But I mean, I have heard, I'll go on the record that I have heard that, that sergeant that worked internal affairs was just, I hate that guy. I've seen that. And that has a lot to do because, and this is what we teach at Savage Training Group in my classes. I ask my class, which is a lot of sergeants that are either just newly promoted or sergeants that are getting into an assignment in internal affairs. We ask the class, what characteristics, what traits would you want from an internal affairs investigator? And they always say things like, someone who's forthcoming, forthright, honest, impartial, fair, and, don't be biased, man. Don't get a complaint and you work internal affairs. So, that's James Whittaker. You know what? I know James. He's a good dude. This is a bunch of BS. Or, you know what? Yeah, I know James. No way. You know what? Yeah, he cuts corners. So you have this preconceived notion that you're pretty much judging James, and you haven't even began your investigation. So that's that culture that we're trying to, fix and kind of bring out with doing the podcast and teaching.
Yeah, just like how media can impact jury selection and all sorts of stuff.
Exactly.
In the social media era, we see a lot of these crimes being committed, particularly in places like California, and it seems like the narrative is that the police are being held back from doing their jobs. Is that accurate?
Yes. In a sense that officers know that if you risk your life to effect this arrest, especially if they committed a felony, a violent crime, that they're going to go to jail, you're going to book them, go through the whole arrest and booking procedures, and they're going to be out within 2 hours, probably committing the same crime. 100%. Yeah, that's, I don't want to get too political, but we're a fault. It's sad. It's sad to know that, which goes to the point about recruitment, about these young kids. You don't think there's a young kid out there going, wait a minute, you want me to risk my life for someone that just committed a robbery at 7-Eleven and we're going to arrest him and he's going to be out with like 3 hours? I don't want to do that job. 100%.
And when you see things like enforcing COVID protocols in some places or having to have these interactions with homeless people, my instinct would be that people that would join the police force would not be interested in enforcing that as the primary part of their role. You want to be doing real things to change the community. Right.
Yes, absolutely. Quality of life, low minor type of functions, if you will, are super important. And yeah, there was a point in time, in the COVID era where, I don't want to even risk my life of, getting sick and at some point maybe so sick where, I'm looking at death here. Yeah, no, that's very valuable and very valid to bring up. But a lot feel like maybe we shouldn't be doing that much police work. Some police officers out there right now will just look at their screen where there is that someone call 911, it's that, and if you call 911, that's my job. I have to do that. But to be able to go out and, do some proactive police work where you feel, okay, wait a minute, there's been problems here. A lot of cars have been stolen. There's a whole bunch of people doing drugs over there. We got this flyer of this person who committed a murder, a serial robber, that's been robbing banks. Let's go and look around and see what we can find, and maybe we can get this bad guy out of the streets. That's probably not a practice that's happening as often as it should, as it did, I should say, like back in my days.
And what can people do, perhaps around the home, around the community, to help keep everything safe or to keep their family safe?
Well, you know what? Strap up, man. Handle what you got to handle. Know that we're there to help you out. I mean, it doesn't change the basic functions, right? the functions are still there. It is sad to know that, response time to call for service is probably not what it was before. And you know what? We try to do with our best, and we're trying to improve every single day. You got these quality of life issues. Next, there's a robbery in progress. I got to go, and what can you do to prevent crime happening? That's a very challenging, good question. I don't have an answer to that besides the fact that, if you're in your home, just protect yourself as much as you can. Just be aware of your surroundings. I suppose you can carry, OC spray and, just defend yourself as much as you can. That's a tough question. And I say it's tough. It's a challenging question because in the state of affairs we're on now, we don't have that many police officers. We're mandating, some agents are mandating for you to work overtime and be away from your family. There's just a lot of challenges that are happening right now with law enforcement.
Yeah. How would a law enforcement professional decompress? You mentioned the story that you had earlier. What do you do when you come home from that? Obviously, a lot of people turn to alcohol or various other things. What's a healthy way of being able to deal with that?
Yeah, it's for me. It wasn't really. For me, it was just. For me, it was sports. I had to play soccer. I think soccer is what really kept me, football. That's what we call it. Soccer is American. So American, which I am proud, 100%. But that was kind of, for me, a time for me to just forget. And playing for the LAPD soccer team was even better because now it's us just kind of getting away, going to tournaments. I remember we went to a tournament in Calgary. We went to New York and played against other cops. So it was a way of, of just being away from it all. Find something that it's just completely just away from the madness.
No mobile phones, that's what I love about something like soccer or surfing. You're actually out there. You're not looking at your phone.
Paddle out. You know what? I used to paddle out a lot and I miss it so much, but that's a great way of to deal with, your demons, so to speak, Interesting you say that. I had a gentleman from the Department of Corrections. We're talking about like maximum security prisons of a gentleman who just resigned less than 10 years. He suffers from PTSD because he was in the prison yards where he saw just major fights between the blacks and the Mexicans and just stabbing and people dying in front of him. And he was only 23 years old. And he got married. He had a baby born, and going through all this, it consumed him so much. And that's something I can't even relate with. I can only tell you that when I was out in the streets working, it affects me. I can only imagine. And again, LAPD is big. We have over 20 plus different divisions. We can agree that South LA is probably the most violent. And imagine seeing that every single day. What can you do? You know what? Go work out. I'm glad we have CrossFit and all this stuff that you can just, get away. I got a buddy of mine who's a gambler, loves it. He'll go to tournaments, and that's his thing. Sitting there, playing poker and have your little whiskey and just play. That's great. That's what you do. But have it out. Have something that for me, it was just because I've been playing football since I was a little kid, so for me, that was, that's my thing.
Yeah. Good, healthy way of being able to decompress.
Yeah. You have to do that, and like you said, a lot of people turn to alcohol. A lot of people turn to prescription drugs as a way of coping. But you know what? There's help out there. Interesting. You mentioned this particular topic is back 20 years ago, we wouldn't even talk about stuff like this. You weren't even allowed to talk or even bring it up, out in front. But there's actually firms, and there's actually, how they have life coaches? Mm-hmm. They actually have firms, law enforcement coaches, that unions hire these firms so that you, as a retired officer that went through, you can only imagine, divorce, adultery, drugs, and the whole nine, that would pretty much hold you by the hand and be your coach and say, hey, how was your day today? And, you have that, what do they call that? You have their responsivity principle, if you will, where the style and the modality by which you're providing to that officer, they can relate,
Yeah.
as opposed to, going to your therapist.
Yeah.
It's different, or
Sure. Career academic trying to help.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, can't go to your teacher to talk about that.
Yeah.
You can't go to your spouse to really, how is she supposed to respond to these principles of you having all these demons and all these really bad thoughts and, the distress that comes along with it. So yeah, we're doing better. We're doing better in that aspect.
For sure. Well, final question before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard to show yourself on your worst day?
Perseverance. Don't give up. Don't quit.
Love it. Love it. Let's now get into the Win the Day rocket round. 10 questions to some quick answers. You up for this one, Marlon?
Let's go. Let's roll, man.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
No stone goes unturned.
Love it. Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Oh, no, coffee for sure. One of my sponsors I just picked up is a coffee company.
Awesome. Who is it? Give them a shout out.
Coffee, Coach 7 products. They're going to be on the logo. They're awesome. You got to have coffee. Everybody has to have coffee.
Yeah. Let's put a link to that in the show notes too. Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
You should have went to law school right after high school and you should have been a hell of a lawyer. And one day I'll take the exam and I will get my license.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most, or is there a book that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
Ooh. God, that's a good one. Because I'm a Malcolm Gladwell fan, so you got to read The Tipping Point.
Yeah, great one.
That's a great one. But then again, I'm also a sports fanatic and Gator, Ron Guidry. I always wanted to be the next Louisiana Lightning and the New York Yankees left-handed pitcher. So that's a phenomenal book in his story. So I would say both.
Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Is there one vulnerability?
Yeah. Was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Yes. Impulse. Absolutely. Being a cop and being impulsive, and not to self-diagnose myself, but it could be a disorder. You know what? Just go. Some people don't go. Shooting's going down. Now, don't get me wrong. You're a nervous wreck responding to a shooting but we're going. And so that impulsivity helps.
Yeah.
But in other personal situations, it probably doesn't help that much.
That's so good. I hear about the stories from the SEALs. It's the nerves you have before you jump out. Once you've already made the decision to jump out of the plane, you're there. You're figuring it out. Yeah. That's what it is. It's just making the leap.
Acting on impulse is good for law enforcement.
I think that's really interesting. Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
That you can grow so much out of it. There's so many lessons learned. When you fall and you pick yourself back up, it's almost as if that's what's needed to achieve, to succeed.
Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Oh, gosh. James are getting good. I would say... Real good question. I didn't think about that one. I'm going to have to go sports, and I'm going to have to go with, oh gosh, there's so many to pick from. And he's alive, and I listened to him, Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick is just phenomenal, and I would love to have a conversation as to, plus his radio voice, the fact that he's, kids, he started at CNN, ended up as one of the pioneers of ESPN SportsCenter when SportsCenter was nothing, when ESPN was nothing, and how he quit after 20 years with his family, and now he has his own show. Yes, Dan Patrick for sure.
Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
What tool or resource? Oof. I'm going to say tool. Help me run my life or my business. I would say my daughter. It's got to be my daughter. You know what? Waking up every day and being a father.
Yeah.
That's my
That's your why?
that's my why. Absolutely. That's what keeps me going. I could have said things like, my Monster Zero drink that I have to have, or these Joe Rogan's got this new pills from a company on it. It's, hey, your brain is, it's going to lift you. So, something to lift me. I would go with that, but I got to dig deeper and say that my resource, my daughter, my tool, being a father, for sure. That's what keeps me going, man.
So good. Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
Oof, I got this one. Machu Picchu. Let me tell you something. I am 100% Peruvian like you wouldn't believe. I'm a flag waver like you would not believe. Ever since I came here from Peru. And I flex. I'm Latino 100%. And I went to Machu Picchu in Cusco. For all those who are not familiar, it's one of the 7 wonders in the world. Is that what it's called? With my daughter. And I got to tell you, I felt so fraudulent when I got to Cusco, to Aguascalientes, and then to go to Machu Picchu to see and to know and to listen and to feel the Inca Empire. Is a phenomenal story. It made me feel like I cannot believe I've been flag waving and I didn't even know the history of my own country. So to me, and to anyone who's listening and watching, you have to go to Machu Picchu. You're talking about, in the 1500s, these Incas just came up with these trails and how they actually built and live, society, how they built to cook and to walk and to bring product and everything, to the point where the Spaniards, I don't know if you knew this or not, but in 1912 it was conquered, right? I mean, so Spaniards, Lima, right, the capital of Peru, it's very Spaniard, it's a Spaniard colony, it's a lot of Spanish names, but you can imagine from 1500 to 1900, that's a 400-year absence where no one even knew where these ruins were. And the Spaniards, even back in the day, tried so hard to make it up there and they just couldn't. That is a phenomenal, phenomenal story. So my suggestion is you have to go to Machu Picchu.
Yeah, I love it. And final question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
One thing I do to win the day, just be positive, man. You know what? Be flexible. Be flexible. Not everything is, life is not guaranteed. Not everything you think about goes according to plan. So you know what? Have a good plan and just be flexible about that plan.
Yeah, love it. So good. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Marlon, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at Marlon_Marrache. Visit his website, blueconsultinginc.com, and check out his Internal Affairs Police podcast on YouTube. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Marlon, thanks so much for coming on.
James, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.